Okay, tonight we have a special guest coming on, somebody who I've been really excited about interviewing. He's an author, lecturer, and filmmaker. He has 8 books, one called, 10 books. I'm outdated. Ladies and gentlemen, I have L.A. Marzulli on with me tonight. I'm very excited about having him on. He has a YouTube channel that's growing by every day. It seems like you're growing by the hundreds. But I'm really excited about having you on, LA. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Tony. Great to be here.
It's great to have you, man. I listened to a lot of your different interviews and stuff, and a couple weeks ago, I heard you talking about, I think it was on Hagman and Hagman, where you mentioned about how you had seen UFOs, and it just, for some reason, hearing you say that just hit me, and I was like, why have I never tried getting you on the show? And so I emailed you, and I was really grateful that you emailed me back saying, let's do it. So if you want to start off the show with us tonight, telling us what you saw with the UFOs.
Well, I've told this story a gazillion times, and I'll say it again because it's just, it was life-changing. It's one thing to be a skeptic and, no, it's swamp gas, it's weather balloon, it's the planet Venus, all this stuff. I get all that. It's another thing, once you're hit with the phenomenon in your face, now what do you do? Now what do we do? If you see something, how do you react to it? I know the way I reacted, but I was 12 years old. I was a kid. I was at Boy Scout Camp Horseshoe, Rising Sun, Maryland, and we were getting ready to go to lunch, and we were really hungry. And I think, hot dogs, who knows, whatever they were going to eat. So the swing guy goes, hey, I know a shortcut to get back to camp. So we took this shortcut. And they changed the website because I went there a couple of days ago. They used to have a map of all the trails around camp, and I could point you exactly where that trail was. Still exists. And we're walking up this trail, and it was like a ravine, kind of steep, a lot of boulders. So we're hopping boulder to boulder to boulder, 12-year-old kids. Beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky, sun's out, and we're in a single line. And there's 4 of us. And the lead guy goes, wow, what's that? The other 2 kids in front of me go, wow, what is that? I'm the last kid in the line. I go, where? And they go, there. And they point up. And it's the classic silver disc, basically like the one above me. I want to believe. I'm not going to pull, but that's what it was. The classic silver disc, about the size of my thumbnail. If I hold my thumb out like this, about the size of my thumbnail. Classic disc, the sunlight glinting off of it. No noise. We watched this thing for 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and it shot straight up in the air. In a blink of an eye, it was gone. And I've heard that. I can't tell you how many people have told me the same thing, that when they watch the craft, all of a sudden, and boom, it's just gone like that, like in a blink of an eye. And they move at just incredible speeds. One pilot that we interviewed for the new film, The Watchmen Chronicles, in their own words, this pilot, Dennis, told me that this thing came in on them. He's a commercial airliner flying at, 30 above cloud, 32,000 feet. And doing about 500 miles an hour from Lima to Mexico City. And this thing comes in on them at basically 35,000 miles an hour, which is just unprecedented.
That's incredible.
And when it left the scene the same way. It was just like, voom. This thing shot straight up, completely gone. And we go running back to Boy Scout camp. We saw a UFO. We saw a flying saucer. By 5 o'clock that night, the other 3 boys that were with me denied that they had ever seen anything. And I was the only kid who would not back down from the story, which it's sort of a life lesson of herd mentality. People will deny what they've seen, change their story to be part of the crowd. No, it's just like The Matrix. Remember the movie where the traitor just goes, he doesn't care. He just wants to have all the good food, and that's all. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
And he betrays everybody, and that's the human nature. I wouldn't back down. I know what I saw. There's actually a film now. It's an older film called I Know What I Saw, and it's people that have seen the UFO phenomenon up close encounters of the first and second kind, and they know that what they saw was real. It wasn't swamp gas. It wasn't a weather balloon. It wasn't a flock of geese. It wasn't the planet Venus. I mean, it's just, and debunkers have used that for decades, and it doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't work anymore because the UFO phenomena is exponentially on the rise. It's just like this. The graph is off. It's just, there's so many of them now, they have trouble keeping track of them. And that some of the researchers are alarmed by the increase of UFOs. So this is what, I've been doing this forever, since I was, a kid, and I saw one. Then, of course, Eric von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, came out. And I was 16, 17, 18 when I forget what year it was, but I was young. And I got that and devoured it, devoured the book. Interestingly enough, and I believed in that paradigm. I was raised in a Catholic church, and by that time I was completely out of, any type of formal religion. And it wouldn't be, for decades, a decade and a half, I became a born-again, spirit-filled Christian at 30 years old. That's 37 years ago. So I was ripe for this, just this whole indoctrination into the so-called ancient astronaut theorist. And now, of course, the films I produce, what I talk about is there's another paradigm of an ancient astronaut, extraterrestrial. It's interdimensional. And I believe, as Jacques Vallée does, and J. Alec Hynek, that this phenomenon is, in fact, interdimensional, not extraterrestrial. And that, of course, is huge. That there's a real difference.
Yes.
But it explains the phenomenon. In my opinion, my position explains the phenomenon in a much better light than theirs does. Because these guys, I was on George Norrie's show, Coast to Coast, a while back, talking about the new film, Watchmen Chronicles. And I said, George, this cat and mouse game has gone on for decades. For decades. They appear, they disappear, they fly here, there's a flap there, they come, they go, they take people, the cattle are mutilated, blah, blah, blah. The whole deal, it just goes on and on and on. Show up already, and they never do. So something is holding them back. Something is restraining them from fully manifesting. And that led me to this new saying that I coined a while back. Actually, a Prophecy Watch is the first time I said it. We go up, they show up. We go up, they come down. And I really believe that that's what happens. And it's not everybody. It's a small remnant of people that actually get out of here. There's 1.8 billion Christians in the world, so-called Christians. Many of them are just a Christian in name only. Yeah, I go to Christmas and Easter, get my ticket stamped damn good. That whole kind of attitude. And it's like, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
And so I think it's a very small remnant that actually goes up. And there's another scripture that tells us that, watch and be ready and pray that you'll be counted worthy. Well, what's that mean? It's like, wait a second. It's not like a carte blanche, get out of jail free card here. I mean, something's going on here. But what's interesting is this. I've heard this before I was a Christian. I heard this when I was a New Ager, that when they show up, before they show up, they will take the people who aren't ready for the big new paradigm shift because, we're the Neanderthals. They'll take us out of here. And then the rest of humanity will go through the paradigm shift together. I've heard this for decades. So the New Agers have already got an answer for what we call the rapture. Go figure.
Yeah, go figure. Yeah, I've never really got into the whole UFO phenomenon until a few years ago. And I started looking into a bunch of different people because I didn't know really where to look. And I came across your stuff and Steve Quayle and some other people that talk about these kind of topics along a more biblical light. And I really found, a home there because it kind of explained things to me in a way for me to understand when it comes to my theological background and how this all kind of makes sense. And so, yeah, I find it very interesting.
It keeps you up at night, that's for sure.
Definitely. It keeps my mind turning all the time. So, one of the things that a lot of people email me about and send me messages is the whole Kandahar giant. People actually send me your video a lot of times. And would you want to go into explaining, how that whole thing came about and what you found with that?
Well, it's very interesting. It came about. Richard Shaw, the producer and the co-producer of the Watchers series, was on a radio show, and this caller called in, and the caller was ex-military, and they off the air they got into a conversation. One thing led to another. So Richard said, well, you need to talk to my friend, L.A. Marzulli. He's written 10 books about the Nephilim because this man claimed to be one of the shooters of a giant at least 12 feet tall. And so, okay, that's a great story. And it corroborates what Steve Quayle has heard, but it's almost unbelievable, right? And so I called this guy. We had a conversation, and I flew out to an archaeological dig in Ohio, where I was at, and this guy met me there. And I met him face to face, could look at the body language, and I'd already heard the story. And I asked him the story 2 or 3 times in the course of a weekend, and he repeated it with the same details. And every time he got to this one part where they come down this ravine like a goat trail, and they land on this ledge which is above this valley, thousands of feet below, and there's a cave up like this, and this giant comes out of the cave, and they're all frozen. And this guy, Dan, is the first guy to break out of the hypnosis, so to speak, and he starts running and firing at this giant. Well, the giant moves with such agility and speed. He's got a pike, he's got a spear in one hand, and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. And they realize he's coming after more. And somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically almost decapitate him with the firepower that they had. And the thing falls to the ground, and that's when the smell becomes overwhelming. It smelled like rotting corpses, just overpowering, nauseating. And this thing was airlifted out. Interesting enough, in Dallas just recently in March, and in April, so it's like, a little over a month ago now, right? This guy came up to me, still active military, and told me that he's a chopper pilot. He landed, he was in Iraq and called out to this one place outside of Baghdad. And as he landed, the moment he landed, he was given an immediate promotion, and then he was given a security clearance went way up. And he flew out a biological entity under a tarp for something very big. And I said, was it a giant? And he just looked at me and went like that. So we've had many reports of them. We know that they're there. I was approached by someone from one of the alphabet agencies because of the Kandahar giant piece. That's the piece that got attention. They know that they're there. Knowing what we know about deep underground labs, they've already got the DNA from these things. They're already figuring out how to inject that DNA into soldiers and make them super soldiers. And what they don't understand is what they're dealing with is the Nephilim. That's what these are. And this raises more questions than it answers. How old was this thing in Kandahar? Was it fairly recent? Was it 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years old? Was it literally left over from the 3,500-year-old war when Joshua and Caleb go in and destroy the giants? Is it that old? Was it hibernating in some sort of stasis underground, and now in these last days being awakened? See, we don't know. Is it able to reproduce? We don't know. If it's truly Nephilim, it's part angel, which is eternal, and part human, but it's in a fixed state and it has no soul. And it's a crazed thing. I mean, it really is. And I wrote about this also in a fictional work in my book, The Nephilim Trilogy. In the very first book, Nephilim, that's what, at the end of the story, they're in a deep underground base, and this giant, this giant gets loose, and all hell breaks loose. So, and I wrote about that in 1999, wow. before Kandahar, before any of this stuff. So in some ways, it's prophetic.
Yeah. Now, I think I remember hearing, probably it was you talking about how they said that they were trained to aim high when they went into this area. And that was because, well, I guess the theoretical reason would be because they knew that these giants were there. Is that right?
Yeah, this one of our connections that came on the record, who's no longer military, but he was in Kandahar, and when they were doing cave fighting, training for cave fighting, and they were told, you're taught to do 2 in the chest, 1 in the head, or whatever, right? Bam, bam, boom, the guy's dead. That's what you're taught, and they were in the cave, and they're going like, a makeshift cave, aim high. And they're going, well, why do you aim high? Just aim high. That's all we're told. And when they finally got to Kandahar, that's when this guy put 2 and 2 together, because this was all circulating around the base that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it. So, look, they're there. The government knows it, and they can't go there. They can't talk about it or release it because it points back to the biblical prophetic narrative, and it points back to the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative, and it points back to Jesus' words, it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns. And that might hold, I mean, we haven't seen this stuff. We know they were here in the Americas. We know that. All the tribes talk about, you know, in my work on Catalina Island, 9-footers out in Catalina. Right. 9-foot guy is really big. If you've got 12-footers running around in Kandahar, that's off the hook. I mean, seriously, a 12-footer, I can't even imagine what that looks like. I'm 6 feet, and there's a picture I show of a guy who's only a foot taller than I am. He's a 7-foot. He was an ex-basketball player. I look like a midget. In fact, what I'm going to do is while you're there, I'm going to see if I can pull this up on my other computer and show it to you guys.
Okay.
So you'll have to ask me another question. I'll try to do two things.
Well, no, I do find it interesting about the whole super soldier thing because I know there's a lot of people that say, well, that's just crazy. They can't do that or they wouldn't do that. And I always say they are doing that. I mean, that they're already, they're coming out, just I think it was last year they came out and they told us that they are farming human organs inside of pigs. That's DNA manipulation. That's hybrid. You know, and if they're coming out and they're saying that and it's in the Huffington Post, then what do you think they're doing behind the scenes? That's old news to them. That's stuff that they're used to. That's just, they've been doing that. So it's like, what do you think that they're actually doing behind the scenes? Because that's, to me, that's serious stuff. And so, I mean, with the whole super soldier thing, to me, it's just not far-fetched whatsoever.
And I completely concur with what you're saying. These guys have an agenda. I mean, they really do. And you have to remember something. They are godless. I mean, they're just godless men that believe that the ends justify the means and they can do anything that they want to do. So I got it. I was able to find it, and awesome. I'm going to show this to you. The guy's face is blacked out. That's a 7-footer right there. Wow. And that's me standing next to him.
Jeez. That's a big difference, and that's only 1 foot.
That's why I show it. Because when you say a 9-footer to people, they don't get it. Oh, 9 feet. Well, that's not that big. Excuse me. 1 foot. 1 foot. And I look like a shrimp. I mean, I look like a grasshopper, and he's only a 7-footer. So you go down to a Jewish guy who's 5'6", right?
Yeah.
And now you get, let's say, Goliath, and I'll just be, you know, if he's 9 feet, it's game over. If he's 10 feet, I mean, as you go up, you go out like this, just like this guy does, and you become this behemoth. It's just, it's beyond anything. So you imagine the shooter that we talk to. He's coming out of he's looking for this patrol. This giant comes out. He said it was at least 12 feet tall. They're all frozen in their tracks. They've never been trained for this. They don't know how to deal with this. This is beyond nightmare. This is like, where am I? Somebody hit me because I must be dreaming.
Yeah. And
finally one guy comes out of it and he starts shooting the thing. And apparently the bullets had no effect. They had to almost cut the head off, which is David and Goliath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really bizarre stuff. So just gives you an idea of what we're up against. But, it's a strange world and it's getting stranger. I want to just get back to the UFO thing just real quick. But, when disclosure happens, and this is what people don't understand, it's not if they're going to show up. It's just a question of when. Is it tomorrow? Is it a month? Is it a year later? And, I mean, if there's disclosure and they don't show up, then that's going to create incredible chaos. In other words, let's say Trump goes, we've known about it. He has an announcement, Joint Chiefs of Staff, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we know about this. They've been here for years. The governments of the world, the Pope says something. I mean, they're all in cahoots together and they're off to the races. That's the game changer. That is the game changer. And people need to understand that look, if it was one or two sightings a week or one or two sightings a year, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It's in the thousands every month now, and it's not going away. And another saying I coined, UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. And with a church in particular, who, the ostrich people in the church, they don't want to deal with this. Yet we sit there.
The ostrich people.
Ostrich people. Head in the sand, please. Don't confuse me with the facts. But they'll sit there and they'll talk about the virgin birth, floating accidents, talking donkeys, staffs that turn into snakes, staffs that hit rocks and water gushes out, staffs that hit the water and the water divides and 3 million people go walking through, men that walk on water, water that's changed to wine. I mean, are you kidding me? We talk about the stuff we read, Domini, Domini, Domini. We read all this stuff in our Bibles and we believe it. And yet we walk out of the church and, that's not happening. Don't look there. Don't worry about what's in the sky. Just love Jesus. It's like, go figure.
Yeah, and I find that fascinating because, we're taught that, the scripture's true. What's in the scripture is true. And people say that, yes, I believe the scriptures. I'm a Christian. I believe the scriptures. And it's like, okay, so when you read through the Bible and you talk about, Noah's staff turning into a serpent and then consuming other staffs that were turned into serpents, we're talking about seas that were parted and we're talking about fire coming down from heaven. And they say they believe all that. But then like a guy like me who mentions Bigfoot, they look at me like I have 10 heads. I'm like,
exactly.
What's wrong with you?
People? What is wrong with you people? You really don't believe in the supernatural. You say you do because it's all in a nice little book and it's all bundled up and you're sitting in a nice warm pew and you don't have to worry about this. You're not seeing the staff turn into a serpent. You're not watching the magicians who are obviously steeped in the dark arts and the occult. Hello, no one ever talks about that. How is it that the magicians just go, no biggie, boom, and they do it too? I wrote about this in the book, The Cosmic Chess Match. There is, at the time of Noah, time of Moses going in, there's a full-blown worldwide occult paradigm in operation. It's there. It's firing on all 8 cylinders. And the vestiges of it trickle down into our society today. And, secret society is the whole deal. They worship Lucifer. They worship Hasatan, Satan. That's who they worship. And they call themselves the sons of the Nephilim. We know that. So, look, all this stuff is real. And yet the church, we go to a little sleepy church here. I love the pastor. He's great. But there's never a word about prophecy. There's never a word about, last days, end times, Jesus is coming soon. It's all, how to succeed and get through life and know who you are. And that's all important. And that's great. I get that. But we need the whole counsel of God, which is, the stuff that I get into.
Right.
We were just up, the alternative to that is, we were just up at a church in Michigan. Pastor Pete Valdez, the real deal, man. Pete and Shirley. These guys were the real deal. I mean, I've been in a lot of different churches. I've seen it all. This guy, when the church doors are open, he's in the front foyer. He greets everybody by name. And it's not, hey, nice seeing you again, Bob. Great to be here. Hello, Julie. No, man, it's like, hey, he's like all over you.
Yeah.
It just exudes the love of the Lord. It's unbelievable. And it's genuine. It is genuine. This man's got totally sold out, loves the Lord, just completely into his people. And he had me come in and I talked Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night.
Wow. That's great.
I gave him everything. I mean, not everything, but I gave him like 10 hours basically of presentations, lots of yak, all with full-blown PowerPoint, embedded movies. And these people walked out of there, they're on information overload. I get that, but that's a good thing, because now they won't be deceived. That's the whole point of what we're doing. They won't be deceived by what they see, by the nonsense from the other side of the aisle that's trying to tell us that we were visited by, extraterrestrials. How about interdimensionals? Just change the word and we're all on the same page.
Exactly. And, I grew up with a grandfather who, I forget the name of the group that he was part of. I want to say like some kind of businessmen's fellowship Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship or something like that back in the day. And he told me some miraculous stories that, he was like God, like he would be praying for somebody and a person's leg would grow right there on stage. He would be praying for somebody and the sight would be healed, hearing, angels showing up. And it's just like that kind of miraculous stuff. I kind of grew up around and stuff. And I'm like, for me personally, I don't have a hard time believing that stuff because I was raised around that stuff. I was raised, that's real stuff. But I guess, majority of the church today just doesn't get it.
It's all sanitized. Look, I'm not bagging on the church. I'm part of the church. We're trying to wake up the church.
Sure.
We're trying to pull the ostrich heads out of the sand and go, look around. It's everywhere. Come on. And you know what? One of the things that, I guess I sort of bring a unique perspective because I had a guru. My third eye was open. I astral projected before drugs, acid. I smoked at Woodstock. I mean, I did it all. I was 13 years old when the Beatles came out. I was swept up in the greatest influx of Eastern mysticism. I did silver mind control. I read Carlos Castaneda's books. I went on vision quests. I mean, I did all that. And the thing is, it never, ever, ever touches the heart of man, which is deceitfully wicked. All those things just mask it over. And the only thing that ever dealt with my own depravity was when I gave my life to Jesus. And that changed everything. Because now I realize that, I'm a depraved human being. He died on the cross for me. And he's going to change me. He's going to take me and put me into his forge. He's going to heat me up, and he's going to shape me. He's going to pound me into the man that he wants me to be. It's been 37 years since I came across the line, and I can't even believe what I'm doing. I mean, I can't even fathom what he's made me. Apart from him, I can do nothing. That's what he says. Remember when you're out going to Gethsemane, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. I understand that. We hear those words, but when we start to live it and we start to understand and get our heads around it and grasp the idea that he's everything, man. I mean, he's my creator. Go figure. How does that work?
Right.
How does that work? Praise God, giver of life. The first time I ever spoke in tongues was I had the tongue and I had the interpretation. I still remember it. The tongue was et sardonis everebrium. That's what came out of my mouth. Et sardonis everebrium. In the translation, they came out together. Praise God, giver of life. That was my prayer language. That's when my first time I ever spoke in my prayer language. So having been on the other side of the aisle, I saw a Mahatma, a holy man in India with a shaved head and the orange robe. I saw him bilocate 100 yards down the beach.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The stuff I've seen. Because I was on the other side of the aisle.
Wow.
That's the whole point. So it's like, I'm like used to the supernatural. I go to church and it's like flatline, except for Calvary Chapels in the day. And that was really cool. 37 years ago, there were believers meeting and people sat around and they waited on the Spirit of a living God and things would happen. People would get healed. People would get a word of knowledge. I mean, all that stuff was real. All that stuff for the most part in most churches has been shut down. Or we get what I call the hyper-Pentecostal foolishness, where, gold dust and feathers and diamonds, which appeal to the flesh, but have no, anytime I was a worship leader for 25 years. Anytime the Spirit of a living God really showed up, people are on their faces, they're on their knees, they're weeping. That's what I see. There's reverential silence. There's nobody swinging from chandeliers and slapping a bunch of people and falling down. None of that nonsense. People are broken. There's this holiness that permeates, a holiness that permeates the room. People are weeping, convicted of sin, convicted of what they are, and just crying out to Jesus. People are getting healed, deeply healed of emotional baggage that they've carried around in some cases decades. That's what I've seen. That's what I want. Oh, I can't, just give me that, man. That's it. We went up to this one place years ago, life-changing for me. It was called Tulare. And we heard that there was like the Lord had broken out there, and in a good way. That this evangelist came in this little cow town. I mean, the church would seat maybe 30 people. It was more like a chapel than a church. And we walked into this place I'll never forget it. I opened the doors and I looked at my friend Bill Myers and I just went, oh my gosh, we're in the tabernacle. I mean, you could just, I got goosebumps. And we just sat down really quiet, didn't say anything. And the guy was like leading and said, if you're here to do anything, please don't. First thing he said, if you're here to do anything or, just don't. It's all about him. Just sit in his presence. And, we went up and I had a vision where the Lord took me out. Not like Paul, like out of the body, just a mental picture, a vision. And he showed me the universe, and I realized how small I was, how inconsequential I was. And I was troubled by that. I didn't understand it. And I wrestled with that for 2 or 3 days. And finally, he gave me the interpretation. He said, LA, that, look how big everything is, and look how small you are. And yet I love you, and I care about you, and I know every hair on your head. And that was life-changing for me. And from that, I wrote this song called Joy, and the choir did it. It was really, really cool. But you walk into that place, and holy, reverential, people just they had like an altar there. I remember one woman just like leaning up against the altar, just resting in his presence. It's like, and then you click the channel, right? and you watch some of the nonsense that's out there. It's just like, oh my God. Right. It's like, which is live and which is Memorex? Where do I want to go? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. Let's bring it back to the Paracas skulls. I know. Yeah, look behind you right there. Yeah, absolutely.
That's an elongated skull. That it's not a real one, obviously, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a cast. That's what it looks like. We don't have a lower jaw to it. But here's what's telling, and this is the work of Rick Woodward, who's written for us, and his new work will be published. I'm republishing On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 1, 2, and also all the DNA evidence under one new book. And it'll be like about $80 because it's like 600 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the whole deal.
That's huge.
This is the foramen magnum right here. This is the foramen magnum. This is where our spinal column comes up. I'll use my finger. Spinal column comes up like this and attaches to the base of the skull. But our spinal column is here in the center of our skull. This one, as you can see, is as far back to the back as if you go for any further back, you are outside the skull. That means like here's I mean, serious, I'm looking right at it and you can see that. It's like if you go any further back, you're outside the skull.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not normal.
No.
That's not. And you can people go, well, it's just all cradle headboarded, LA. And this is the deal. You talk to these people and they act like they know everything. They don't know everything. Some of these people have never actually looked at one of these and they've never held them. They've never looked at the morphology, the structure of the skull. But they know all about it. They'll tell you, oh, it's all cradle headboarded. Nonsense. Some of them were cradle headboarded, but not all of them. And we believe, and notice here, there's no sagittal suture. There should be a sagittal suture which goes down and splits this part of the skull, what's called the parietal. It's called a sagittal suture, and it goes from the frontal plate here all the way to the rear, the occipital plate right there, and it would split the skull and the parietal into two halves, the parietal plate. That's what it's called. This doesn't exist. Okay, there's a disease called craniosynostosis, where the sagittal suture in late age seals itself. I get that. But why is it that we find many of the Paracas skulls without a sagittal suture? Is it a genetic anomaly? And then we say, yes, it is. We've done preliminary DNA testing on the hair that we took out of Paracas, and all the hair from Paracas showed a European ancestry. Immediately the lab goes, oh, nope, it's a contamination. And we go, wait a minute. You're telling me that your lab prides itself on the fact that there is no contamination. And with one of these artifacts in particular, we were in control. We unwrapped the mummy skull, 2,000-year-old mummy skull. We unwrapped it, okay? And, I mean, come on, I'm going to show you this in a second. We unwrapped this thing, and the hair was immediately tagged and bagged. We know exactly where it came from, so that's not going to fly. I mean, it's just not. It was this skull right here, and I'll show it to you in just a second. This was what we call the baby skull right here.
Okay.
Notice the red hair, and we had hair samples of that, and the hair samples went right up to the lab, and it shows a European ancestry. And that can't be, because we know that from the Darwinian land bridge, okay, the haplogroups were all U2E1. Let me just show you why this is important. Let me get there. Hold on. According to Darwinism, can you see this okay, or is the light?
Not yet. Up a little bit when you turn the screen, yeah.
You see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is called the Beringian land bridge. This is where, at the end of the last ice age, allegedly, that the Bering Strait, which is a waterway now, was open. It was a land bridge. So people from Asia came across and populated the Americas. And we're saying, okay, I get that. Yeah, that happened. But we also know, and our hypothesis has always been this, that 3,500 years ago, when Joshua and Caleb went into the Promised Land, the Nephilim tribes were there. The Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Zamzumim, the Emim, the Anakim, long necks. And we believe it was a diaspora of giants that left, or Nephilim tribes that left the area. If that's the case, we should find vestiges of it. And that's why we're doing this. Right. Because it goes back and proves the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative. It also goes back and proves that the Native American oral tradition, that there were 9-foot giants in Milan that were cannibalistic, 6-fingered giants. And we know that. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, because it all traces back and points back to the supernatural. And this is why we were at loggerheads with the Darwinists, because, you know, they don't want to believe any of this. There is no supernatural in Darwinism. There's only mindless evolution. There is no God. The Bible is just a bunch of fairy tales. That's what they believe. We're saying, no, Bible isn't fairy tales. The Bible is the truth. It's the written word of God, and you would do well to understand what it talks about.
So with the Nephilim dispersing throughout the world, essentially, is that how we can look at the pyramids that we find in South America and things like that?
There's a book that I'm in the process of writing, which deals with some of this, and I won't tell you the hypotheses, because if I do, someone will get it and steal it from me, because that's how things work. But I'm writing something. It'll be out probably in 2018.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I often wonder about that kind of stuff, but I do remember hearing you talk about that, and I found it very interesting. Very, very interesting. So another thing that people ask me about, and I just heard it yesterday, is that some people say that they believe that Bigfoot or even Dogman, things like that, cryptids, are some kind of Nephilim. What would you say to that?
Absolutely. No doubt in my mind, that's what they are. Yeah, and Ryan Moorhead, I haven't read his new book yet, Quantum Bigfoot, but I'm sitting on my desk here. But I'll probably be interviewing Ron in the next couple of months, whatever, when I get some time to do it. But yeah, I mean, that's what it is, in my opinion. They have cone heads. They're conical in shape, most of them. And once again, it's who knows what we're looking at with this stuff. I mean, who knows? But they pop in, they pop out. I've had people come up and tell me this. They can control you on some levels. It's very intense. And I got to go in like 5 minutes.
All right, then let's get some closing statements here. You mentioned about the new film you're working on, right? Would you want to talk about that for a few minutes?
You mean the one I just released? Or,
yeah, the one you just released.
Yeah, that is called In Their Own Words. The Watchmen Chronicles is a brand new series. In Their Own Words, UFOs are real. It's an hour and 37 minutes long. We got people from all walks of life coming on the record. If you go to my YouTube channel, L.A. Marzulli, there's a lot of stuff. In fact, we just did another update today. Al came on. Al Matthews is sort of a centerpiece of the film, and I did a Skype interview with Al last night. It's a two-parter. I'll do part 2 tomorrow. Al came on the record, and it's just amazing what he his testimony and what he says. That's up on the YouTube channel, and we'll get into that more tomorrow. I interviewed a man today. I hate to say it, but it's sort of a deathbed confession, and that'll be up later on in the week. His account of what he saw, including some drawings that he did. The UFO phenomenon is real. And the people that come on the record in the film, in their own words, that's why the title, have seen something from all walks of life, everything from close encounters of the first kind, orbs coming up next to cars, missing time, an entire car beamed up into a ship, 4 hours of missing time, a pilot that sees the UFO coming at 30,000 miles an hour, two whistleblowers that worked, and that one of them works in an underground base. The other one was taken to an underground base and saw stuff. The whistleblowers come out. They talk about what they've seen. Paul McGuire and different pastors like Pastor Billy Crone, Pastor Paul Begley, Frank Bolella come in on the record. Gary Stearman of Prophecy Watchers talk about the phenomena, talk about what it is. Gary talks about what he saw in Kansas. Frank Bolella talks about what he saw. Billy Crone weighs in on it. Billy's, talking about UFOs. Paul McGuire comes in and talks about disclosure. It is an hour and 37 minutes. And of packed information. Wesley Sangiori does a marvelous job on bringing the stories to life through computer-generated imagery. And it's all moving stuff. So as the person's talking, all of a sudden now cut over, and there's Wesley's, CGI, and you're watching it. As you're hearing Al talking about, I was out on the ice rink and I looked up and 3 UFOs. Bam, there they are. Wesley just brings it to life through CGI. So he did a great job, and it's the beginning of a long partnership between the two of us, because he's just a great guy, and he's doing a new book cover actually for the On the Trail of the Nephilim Volume 1, 2, and essentially 3. So that's, folks, go to thewatchmanchronicles.com, thewatchmanchronicles.com, watchmanchronicles.com. Check it out in their own words. Watch the trailer. You can also buy it by going to my website, lamarzulli.net. By the way, I will be in Oceanside, California, Friday night at a place called The Anchor. Go to the blog, lamarzulli.net. You can see where it is. Next week, I'll be joining Pastor Russ Dizdar and Pastor Dave Dovenmeyer up in Ohio. We'll also be going out to the Great Circle Mound there on Sunday. So the conference starts Friday, Saturday, all day Sunday. Hope to see you there in Ohio. Again, go to the blog, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, and you can get all the info that you want.
Well, thank you very much for coming on tonight and sharing that information, man.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it, man.
Take care, man.
Thank you. God bless you.